Currently, I'm a junior in high school, and as of this time, the events of this story happened just this last September 2019. When I graduated middle school, I was hit with the reality that I was going to have to go to high school that was, for a lack of a better phrase, not up to my standards. I know that makes me sound completely pretentious, but due to my family's current economic situation, I was not able to go to my desired school. Anyways, as soon as freshman year started, I noticed the difference in education between me and my classmates, but it didn't let that bother me. For the most part, I made friends quite fast. However, some people in my classes always threw me a nasty look, no matter what I did. You see, I take a lot of pride in my English because, in my opinion, it's really good and almost indistinguishable from a native English speaker, and I take any chance I get to use it. Since I come from Mexico, a lot of people, while speaking English but don't exactly dominate the language, look down on English speakers, at least where I'm from. So ever since I use it in class, a lot of people look at me weird except for this one guy, Pedro. Pedro was always a weird one. He was the cliché quiet kid who sat at the back of the room with his hoodie up and rarely spoke to anybody, except for me. He had a sort of fascination with me, especially my English. Every time we talked, which was mostly when we were assigned as teammates for a project, he wanted to speak in English, even if the class that we were in wasn't English. At first, I thought it was silly, flattering even, but then he became more obsessive with it. And when we were paired up, he would refuse to work unless I spoke to him in English, and sometimes would even destroy our work if I stopped talking in English. I drew the line after we got paired up for our final project. Halfway through the final project, I told Pedro a specific instruction, but he didn't understand me. So I repeated it, but he still didn't get it. So I told it to him in Spanish, and that's when he flipped out at me and started cursing his lungs out in the middle of class. He then grabbed my computer, deleted our file, which mind you had 10 pages of our chem project, and then dropped my computer on the ground. I was furious, but before I could really do anything, the teacher stepped in and said that she could take it from there. They talked outside for a couple of periods and then came back in. My teacher told me that Pedro just got carried away in the moment, and that he would no longer pair up with me on projects. But that was not enough for me. The kid destroyed my computer, for God's sake. So I stormed into the principal's office and demanded that he would be expelled. The teacher naturally found that to be a little excessive, and in hindsight it probably was, but she said that something definitely had to be done. The next day, Pedro didn't come to class, and the principal later informed me that he had been transferred to another classroom. And that's where it stopped, for a while at least. On the last day before summer break, Pedro approached me. He said that he was really sorry about freaking out and breaking my laptop, and it felt really genuine, so I forgave him, and that was that. However, once I got home, he started blowing up my phone. While I had forgiven him, I really had no interest in being his friend, so I ignored his text messages all day, and once night came, I went to sleep. I awoke to 73 missed calls from Pedro, all between 3:30 and 4:50 in the morning, and that was enough to freak me out and respond to his texts. As I read through them, they started out normalish. Hi, hey, what's up? And then the greeting quickly turned into text like, why aren't you answering? Answer me, and why are you ignoring me? After a couple texts of him saying that I was ignoring him, he stopped. Until the early hours of the morning. You are the freaking worst. You ruined my life. You're making me do this. Once I read those, I immediately blocked him everywhere that I could. The last that I heard from him for the summer was a crying phone call he made a couple days later from a different phone. Once school had resumed, I quickly figured out that Pedro was, once again, in all of my classes. So, once again, I went to the principal and got him removed from my classes. The story repeats here. I ignore Pedro at school, have him move to another class, and he finds a way to spam my phone with obscene messages. Most of the ones that he sends me are these same ones that he sent during the summertime, except for the only one that managed to freak me out, and you probably know what it is. I know where you live. That one sentence was enough for me to go to the principal and finally get him expelled, with months of harassing messages to help prove my point. As soon as I got him expelled, I changed my number and I deleted all my social media just to be safe. 1 week later, I was home alone when I heard someone banging at my door. I looked through the upstairs window, but I didn't see anyone at the door. I looked around the surrounding area of my house and I saw a figure, all in black, standing about 20 feet from my front door. This all took place at night. Not wanting to risk it, I called the police and my parents. By the time the police came, the figure was gone, and that was the last I've seen of Pedro. I don't even know if that was him or not, but it would be too crazy of a coincidence if it wasn't. I'm not quite sure how to even start this story. A lot of things I've experienced never really fit the subreddit's guidelines until yesterday, when this story wormed its way into my head again. This story happened when I started a new school in the middle of 6th grade. I'm 19 now. This was technically my first middle school, and for many reasons, I transferred out. This definitely didn't help. About halfway through, I was switched into Spanish to finish out the year. I had almost always had a foreign language class, so I thought it would be a pretty easy grade to end with. There was a lot of buzz surrounding the Spanish teacher, Mr. D, and when I first saw him and how he acted, I thought I could tell why. He was a pretty eccentric guy who, if you only heard his voice and weren't looking at his stern face, you would think that he was pretty jovial. He almost always pronounced our names wrong, and had this gigantic windmill on wheels in the corner of his room. The windmill reminded me that I had actually heard about this teacher from an older boy called Jay in my Sunday school class. It's weird how things can change so much in a number of years. I remember telling him that I was going to his school. My mom and I had run away in the middle of the 6th grade year, and I would start at my new school after Christmas break had ended. It was nice to know that I at least had a couple people that I knew, so I asked if he could tell me about the school, or if he had any advice. Jay told me that if I had ever got Mr. D, to transfer out immediately. It sounded a little bit dramatic, but as we got more acquainted with Mr. D, so did he get more acquainted with us. One thing that always made us all uncomfortable was how he would rub chapstick on his lips fairly aggressively for like a minute, which was definitely made worse when he would stand with one leg resting on something and his crotch leaning forward. Sure, it was pretty uncomfortable, but not the worst thing in the world, just a bit odd. Have you ever seen a woman with her boobs rested on a desk? Sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's an accident, especially when you're short and sitting down. Mr. D started to do this, but with his. He would stand close to a desk to look at their work, but his bulge would be laying on their desk. He wasn't that tall, so he had to stretch a little to do it. But given how strange he already seemed to be, I brushed it off as him not being self-aware. I just feel bad for the first row. Flash forward, and all of his little idiosyncrasies seemed to be more prominent as the days marched on. I remember once he even answered his phone and carried his conversation on a bit before stepping out of class. I should note, he wasn't a great teacher. He wasn't even a good teacher. English obviously wasn't his first language, which was fine because he was there to teach Spanish. Unfortunately, he didn't speak Spanish either. He would always use the school PC to pull up Spanish videos on YouTube for us, and would mindlessly stare at his personal laptop. Like I said, a pretty easy class. I just feel bad for the other students who didn't already know certain things when the test came. We walked in one day, and on my desk, the chair in front of mine and the desk in front of mine, there is a semi-straight line of off-white liquid. It was mainly on my desk and thinned out across the chair and desk in front. Mr. D came over not quite fast enough as the kid behind me asked what it was. All he got was nothing. as he very quickly wiped it away with his hand and rubbed it on his pants. He couldn't say water because it wasn't clear. It really only looked like one thing, but there wasn't any way to definitively prove it was. I tucked my hands on my sleeves and I did my best not to touch the desk. About a week after that, I came into my English class I had at the end of the day to hear one of the girls having a pretty loud argument with our English teacher. I walked in at the middle, but the girl, Megan, was extremely upset and asking why she shouldn't go to the principal. Megan was a bit of a hothead, sure, but she was a really nice girl. I couldn't see her dramatizing a situation this much. I later found out what happened from my best friend at the time, who was in Mr. D's class when it went down. Their class was ahead of us, so their test was scheduled for that day. After the papers were passed around, Mr. D went back to zoning out on his laptop until Megan needed to ask a question. She had had her hand up for ages and he never noticed, so she went over to where he was and freaked out on him. He was watching you know what with the sound off on the laptop that he always brought with him and gave all his attention to. So when I came in, Megan was being reprimanded for being pretty verbal with Mr. D. Our teacher was basically telling her that she shouldn't have been so upset with the teacher doing that in class, and that it's his laptop as if that nullifies anything. Looking back, it explains so much of his shifty behavior. The junk rest on my desk, the hardcore stares, the personal laptop all the time, and the definite white stuff on our desks. It wasn't the first time that he had done it, and it wouldn't have been the last time if he hadn't got suspended for the rest of the month. Mr. D disappeared and we had a sub finish out the rest of the year with us. I got the heck out of that school after everything that had happened there, but still kept in touch with a couple friends who went. They told me that Mr. D was back, but for a while was the gym teacher and the co-soccer coach, and then the next year taught English. I really want to say it surprises me that he was brought back, even without knowing anything about what he teaches, but it doesn't. In hindsight, that school was atrocious. I have so many memories of bad things that students and teachers alike did. Another teacher was only given a suspension for actively looking up girls' skirts. It's just concerning to know that Mr. D probably still works there. This happened when I was a sophomore in high school. I used to take a private bus to school and back. However, when it came to dropping me off at home, I was always the last one because I lived a little bit outside of my school district. My bus driver couldn't drop me off after dropping everyone in my school up because she had to pick up the elementary school kids. As a high schooler, we left school much earlier. So, I either had to wait for her to drop every elementary school kid off, or I could just walk home from the elementary school. It was pretty close to my house. It was only about a 10-minute walking distance. I would walk home every day from that stop. On one particular day, I got off the bus that would park behind the school's field in the back and I started walking towards this adjacent parking lot. The school is located in front of a very busy street that was connected to the highway, and in front of the school, there is a shopping mall. I always wore headphones to avoid the noise of the busy street while I was walking home. When I got to the other parking lot, a small white car had pulled up and the guy inside it started calling out to me. I usually ignore everyone that tries to talk to me when I'm walking home, but I accidentally made eye contact, so I decided to see what he wanted. I didn't notice it then, but looking back, the man was acting very strange. He was sort of jumpy and sweaty. His car was old and he had a mess inside. In his passenger seat was a woman who looked annoyed or angry. I assumed they were just hot because it was nearly 90 degrees outside. He was asking me if I knew where the mall was. Not the mall that is across the street, but there were a few shops independent of it that you had to go around. It's still visible by the naked eye though. I told him yeah, just go straight from behind the school, make a right, cross the busy street and then make a right at the mall. He was acting like he didn't understand what I was saying, and asked if I knew Spanish. So, I explained in Spanish. Again, he pretended he didn't understand, so he asked if I could get inside the car and take him to the mall, and then he would drop me off at home. In my stupid mind at the time, all I thought was this guy is really annoying because you can literally see them all from here. I was also thinking that maybe I should take the ride home since I really didn't want to walk home in the heat. However, something inside me was telling me, no, don't get into this man's car. He kept trying to convince me, and the more he talked, the more nervous he got. Behind me, there is another car stationed next to a tree. Sometimes parents would wait for their kids a couple minutes before school was over. There was a woman in the car with her window down, just glaring at the guy. The guy kept looking behind me and at her. After rejecting him politely for the millionth time, he finally said okay, thank you, and he sped off. I thought about a weird guy and that maybe he's not from here, which is why streets are confusing to him. The lady behind me said, "Be careful who you talk to." I looked and awkwardly smiled and said, "Yeah, thanks." On my way home, all I felt was annoyance at the guy for interrupting me while I was walking home, and the lady was talking to me as if I didn't know about stranger danger. Years later, after listening to other people's stories, I realized that the man was trying to kidnap me. He was trying to get me inside his car, and the lady behind me staring at him was making him very nervous. The passenger woman was probably there to make kids feel more at ease, but she was probably annoyed that she had to be there. And maybe she didn't want to be there, or maybe she was in on it, I don't know. It honestly gives me chills to think they went to a school to try to pick up children. I wonder who else they tried talking to. There are parents and security around, which is why I didn't see him as a threat at first. But if it weren't for my gut feeling, I could have easily gotten in his car and disappeared. Also, that lady's presence really scared him off. So, I'm posting this for my boyfriend who doesn't use Reddit much. It'll be from his perspective. This may be short because he doesn't remember a whole lot since he was 7 at the time, and his parents never told him much, but I'm including the key details that he does remember. So, when I was 7 years old, I went to a small school in our little oilfield town in Alberta. There is this guy named Daniel. I don't know if that's his real name, but when I think of him, in my mind defaults to that name. Well, Daniel had slept with my mom ages before I was even conceived, and somehow had in his brain that I was his child. Full-blown delusional. So Daniel decided the smart and rational thing to do was to stalk me. Hardcore. He apparently plotted out a map to my school and he knew my name. He knew how old I was and he knew what I looked like. I have no idea how he got this information. My mom never really used Facebook and lived in a different province. I had never met this man before. Daniel decided one day to take it a step further. He had been ranting to his wife about me and kept telling her that I was his kid and that he was going to drive from British Columbia all the way to Alberta to come kidnap me and bring me back to BC with him. He was convinced that I was conceived earlier than I was, and I was his kid, and my mom made some conspiracy to hide the fact that I was his kid. He had a whole plan for how to kidnap me, down to the date that he was going to do it. His wife decided to call my mom and warned her, and my mom decided to put safety measures up like making sure I was in groups and I had to be home by 4 and so on. I was only told about all of this when I was about 14, and I still don't know all the details. Obviously, he never went through with his plan. So Daniel, who for some reason thought that I was his kid and planned to kidnap 7-year-old me at school, let's not meet. And just an update on an original detail that my boyfriend forgot to mention. Apparently Daniel wanted to kidnap him also to force his mom to get back together with him, despite his mom being married, and Tim also being married. What a creep.